Wherever you are now, perhaps lying back, perhaps seated in quiet reflection, let us together slip into a slower rhythm. The rustle of leaves, the hum of distant wind, the subtle pulse of earth beneath our feet. All of this is part of our context for what unfolds now. Tonight, we will drift gently into a story, not only of trees but of data, of memory, of intelligence that is neither mechanical nor purely biological, but both. What does it mean for a tree to store data? At first glance, the tree may seem simple. A trunk, branches reaching skyward, roots burrowing in the darkness. But beneath that simplicity, in the rings of wood, in the pattern of growth, in the network of roots entwined with fungi, lies a deeper archive, the quiet intelligence of life unfolding across years, decades, centuries. We humans build our computers, our databases, our networks with precision and speed. But what if trees do something far more subtle, far better suited to the passing of time and the cares of the planet? Let us begin with the ring-by-ring story. Each year, many trees produce a new growth ring, a thin layer of wood laid down in the cycle of seasons. That ring is a record of water abundance or scarcity, of temperature change, of nutrient availability, of trauma and healing. Scientists of dendrochronology study these rings to read the story of past climates, environmental stress, even volcanic eruptions. In that sense, the tree is a living archive, holding within its wood the record of time itself. Imagine placing your hand on a trunk and whispering to it, "Tell me what you remember." And in that moment you're touching not only bark and fibre, but decades of experience. The tree, anchored in place, witnesses sunrises and storms, encodes those into its growth. We, by contrast, build digital systems that approximate memory. Bits flipping, wires humming, storage banks spinning. But our systems are brief, expendable, prone to failure. The tree's archive is resilient, humble, and intimately tied to place. And yet the notion of data storage in the tree is metaphorical, but compelling. Because the tree does not store data like a hard drive. It stores relationships. It stores memory of context, how full the water table was, how warm the summer heat, how thick the insects swarmed. It stores the pattern of branching, the distribution of roots, the scars of injury, the healing over time. These are not neat columns in a database, but living inscriptions in organic material. In human computing, we speak of hierarchical data, folders, subfolders, file trees. In the tree of life, the actual tree, the living plant, likewise unfolds in hierarchical structures: trunk, major limbs, minor branches, twigs, root, rootlets, fine hairs. The architecture is natural, adaptive, efficient. The tree senses light above, nutrients below. It allocates resources accordingly. Over years, it integrates experience of its environment, the competition for sunlight, the shading of neighbours, the feeding of fungi, the movement of sap. Here then is a first theme: memory of place. In our digital world, memory is often divorced from place. Bits exist in some server, in some data center, perhaps half the globe away. But the tree's memory is fundamentally local. The wood knows the soil, the roots know the bedrock, the leaves know the wind that passes through its canopy. This local anchoring means the tree stores not just data, but context. It knows where as well as what. Consider the underground world. A tree's roots spread, not uniformly, but in intelligent response to the soil's richness, obstacles, water pockets. Fine root hairs explore microsites. But even more interesting, many trees form symbiotic associations with fungi, the mycorrhizal networks, thread-like hyphae that connect roots and extend into the soil. Through that network, the tree participates in an information exchange. Nutrients flow, signaling molecules travel, memories of stress may be shared. Research shows that trees may retain memory of past droughts or pests, not in the sense of conscious recall, but as changed gene expression, epigenetic markers, altered root structure. The notion of ecological stress memory is now well established. Plants remember past stresses in ways that affect their future responses. As we slow our breath and allow our mind to wander among the trunks and roots, let us ask, what can human computing learn from this silent archive? Our computers store huge volumes of data, but often with high energy cost, frequent migration, and eventual obsolescence. Trees, in contrast, store slower, more sustainably. A tree's wood remains long after it has ceased to grow. The archive endures. The records are not binary, but analog, not discrete, but continuous, not centralized, but distributed. In computing, we talk of redundancy, of fail-safes, of backups. The tree does not need a backup server. Its architecture is intrinsically redundant. Multiple branches, multiple roots, a thickening trunk, overlapping mycelial connections. A wound in one limb is healed by growth elsewhere. The network absorbs trauma. The data remains. The archive remains. The tree accumulates history. Pause now for a moment and imagine a forest in winter. Bare branches against soft light, the ground still. Underneath you sense the roots, the mycelium, the deep memory in the soil. Each tree has grown in this place, remembers this place. It remembers floods, fire, drought, frost, wind, and in its rings, its root patterns, its scar tissue, that memory is stored. Human data systems often lack permanence, servers fail, drives crash, migrations corrupt. But a tree, if undisturbed, can live for centuries, millennia even. The world's oldest trees hold nearly 5,000 years of growth rings, each one a year's story. The data archive there is vast and yet silently carried. As humans, we often think of big data, cloud storage, exabytes. But perhaps the memory in a single living tree is richer in terms of lived experience, context, resilience. Let us wander further into the notion of data compression and encoding. In our computers, we compress files, we encode video, we use algorithms to reduce space. In the tree, the encoding is elegant. One ring encodes an entire year of growth, sunlight hours, water stress, temperature variation, internal allocation of sugars. The width of the ring, the density of the wood, the isotopic composition, these all store data. Scientists use isotopic analysis of tree rings to reconstruct past climates. The tree did not intend this, but the record is encoded. The tree's cells laid down hold within them this chemical signature. When a tree suffers trauma, say damage to bark, grazing by animals, insect infestation, it often lays down a scar, a zone of altered growth. That zone records the event, the tree's reaction, the period of stress, the subsequent healing. That is data too, an event logged in the wood matrix, persistent. Our computers record logs, but they may not survive migrations, may be deleted or overwritten. The tree's archive cannot be simply deleted without destroying life. Another layer. The tree's architecture itself evolves over time. Branches that fail are pruned away by nature. New ones emerge. Root architecture changes based on soil condition. The tree's memory influences its shape. In this sense, the form is the data. The branching patterns tell of light competition. The root spread reveals soil patterns. The mycelial connections speak of network reach. We might think of it as a living data structure, tuning itself to environment, storing its history in growth and decay. Now consider the economics of computing. Energy consumption, hardware cost, maintenance, cooling, data centers. The tree performs its storage with sunlight, photosynthesis, nutrient recycling. The cost is built into nature's system. A tree uses no artificial power grid. It draws energy from the sun, recycles nutrients, manages its internal storage, wood, bark, sap, with remarkable efficiency. So when we compare human computing to tree computing, in a metaphorical sense, the tree wins on energy efficiency, integration with environment, resilience to time. Let us drift into philosophical terrain for a moment. The tree's memory is humble, yet profound. It does not proclaim, it simply grows. It does not compute in the manner of silicon, but it organizes life, stores time, archives place. What if we learned to build our systems more like trees? What if our databases were more analog, more distributed, more resilient, less reliant on constant power and upgrade cycles? What if our computing embraced place, context, and time? Back in the forest, you might walk among the trunks and sense the quiet stillness. The hum of life is slow here. It is not about rapid queries or instant results. It is about gradual accumulation, about depth, about slow reflection. That pace is part of the archive system. The tree does not hurry. The rings form slowly, the roots grow slowly, the network deepens slowly. In human computing, we chase speed and latency, but perhaps speed has its costs. The tree's archive thrives in slow time. When we build systems today, we speak of storage, memory, retrieval, deletion. The tree stores. It rarely deletes, except by decomposition. It rarely retrieves in the sense of random access. Instead, it references its past by shaping its present growth. The archive is read only in a sense, by scientists, by naturalists. But for the tree itself, the memory is alive, embedded in its form and function. Pause again. Take a breath. Consider the contrast. You on your device, uploading, deleting, searching. The tree rooted in its site, recording, storing without hassle, without backups, without flash media. Its archive is built to survive storms, years of drought, changes of climate. The data is implicitly encoded, implicitly accessible to the tree and to the scientists who know how to read it. In the next section, we'll wander into root networks, fungal symbioses, the underground memory banks of forests, and how trees and their fungal partners approximate a computing system of sorts, sharing resources, signaling stress, balancing loads. We will explore how the architecture of roots and mycelium mirrors network topologies in computing, yet remains deeply grounded in Earth. The story will turn toward the economy of storage, materials, energy, time, and how trees have solved it over eons. Let us rest here for a moment, immersed in the quiet of our own minds, imagining a forest in deep stillness. Let our pace remain slow, our thoughts gentle. As the twilight deepens, so too will our understanding gradually, layer by layer, settle in again. Let your breathing slow. Imagine yourself now beneath the surface, down where light cannot reach, where the roots weave through soil, rock, and decay. Here, life moves differently. It moves through darkness, through touch and scent, through the quiet exchange of molecules. And here, in the shadow world beneath our feet, lies a network of astonishing sophistication, the mycorrhizal web, sometimes called the wood wide web. If the trunk and crown of a tree are its public face, its underground network is its inner consciousness, a place of memory, exchange, and communication. What we're about to explore may sound like poetry, but it is science too. a field of inquiry where biology, information theory and ecology intertwine. Imagine a single tree root meeting the thin silken threads of a fungus. The fungus, searching for sugars, touches the root and offers a bargain. I can help you gather water and minerals from the soil, phosphorus, nitrogen, trace metals. In return, share your carbon, your photosynthesized sugars. The root agrees, chemically, molecularly. Their membranes fuse. Molecules of signaling hormones pass between them. A partnership begins. What results is not a simple binary relationship but a network, a living mesh connecting not one tree but many. Fungal filaments, or hyphae, spread from root to root, linking entire groves together. Nutrients flow from tree to tree, but so do warning signals, messages about drought, disease or insect attack. In laboratory conditions, researchers have documented this exchange. When one tree is damaged, chemical cues move through the fungal network to nearby trees, triggering defensive responses even before those trees themselves are harmed. It is here that we might pause and realize the forest is not just an assembly of individuals, but a living database of experience. Each root, each hyphal thread, is both storage and conduit, both processor and archive. In human terms, we might compare this to a distributed computing network, where data is not kept in a single central server, but spread across many nodes. In such a system, resilience is inherent. If one node fails, the network survives. Trees has done this for over 400 million years. Consider the concept of redundancy. Our servers need it. Our neural networks need it. In the forest, redundancy is built in. Thousands of fungal species coexist. Multiple roots overlap. Data, if we may call it that, is replicated across scales. This biological redundancy ensures survival. Even if fire consumes one section of forest, spores and seeds carry the information forward. The same species, the same adaptive strategies regenerated. But what truly fascinates scientists is the way the forest appears to remember. When a drought passes, the surviving trees adjust. Their stomata, tiny pores on leaves, learn to regulate more cautiously the next time water becomes scarce. Epigenetic changes, small modifications to DNA packaging that do not alter the code itself, allow trees to recall previous stresses. They respond faster, more efficiently. In computer science, we might call this caching, keeping a bit of recent data close at hand for quick access. This ecological memory persists across generations. Offspring of trees that survive droughts tend to inherit a heightened resistance, not through mutation, but through chemical marks that affect gene expression. The forest carries the memory of its hardships, silently, efficiently. Now, look again at our digital world. Our machines store data faithfully, but they do not truly learn from the environment in the same embodied way. We can train artificial neural networks, but we must feed them massive data sets, cooling them with energy-hungry systems. A tree learns with light and soil and wind, adjusting over decades. It writes its learning into its very structure. Some computer scientists inspired by this study neuromorphic computing, machines that process information more like brains than binary processors. But perhaps the model we seek is older still, a hybrid between brain and root, between neuron and hypha. Each fungal connection is like a synapse, each chemical signal, a pulse of information. But unlike neurons firing in microseconds, trees operate on slow time, hours, days, years. Theirs is deep memory, not quick recall. This slowness is not a flaw, it is a feature. The longer the interval, the more integrated the signal becomes. While our digital systems measure progress in gigahertz, trees measure it in seasons. In the long view, that patience gives stability. In the forest, the data center hums quietly in loam and decay. The fungi move sugars and nitrogen with astonishing precision. Some species specialize in linking certain tree species. Others bridge gaps between them, creating a heterogeneous mesh of cooperation and competition. In this way, the forest's information economy is self-regulating. Trees that are rich in sugar donate to those in shade. Sick trees may receive aid. But none of this is sentimental. It's biochemistry and equilibrium, honed by evolution. You might imagine the forest's underground as a series of glowing threads, each pulsing faintly with light, sending data packets of carbon and warning molecules across the dark. The imagery isn't far from truth. Scientists have traced radio-labeled carbon moving from one tree to another, measured the velocity of its travel, and found that the network has directionality and purpose. And so, we begin to see that trees store data not only within themselves, but between themselves. The network's memory is collective. When one tree falls, its nutrients, its stored carbon, are recycled through fungal pathways into others. The information, in biochemical form, persists. In a sense, death in the forest is not deletion, it is redistribution. There's an elegance to this. Trees store, share, and reuse information as if running a vast cooperative operating system. There are nodes and signals, feedback loops, and resource allocation strategies, all optimized for persistence and minimal waste. Humans, by contrast, often build systems that consume endlessly, that forget easily, that must be replaced rather than renewed. In economic terms, the forest runs on a closed-loop economy where output becomes input, where waste is almost non-existent. Each molecule of carbon is logged, repurposed, remembered. In computing, we might call this lossless compression. Now imagine standing at the edge of a forest after rain. The air smells of petrichor and sap. Beneath your feet, 1 billion microtransactions are taking place. Roots exhale carbon dioxide, fungi trade minerals, microbes record the day's work. It is the planet's most ancient data center, running continuously since the Devonian period. Humanity's servers, though vast, are fragile in comparison. They require cooling, maintenance, redundancy protocols. The forest cools itself with shade and transpiration. Its data centers run at ambient temperature, powered by sunlight, stabilized by wind. The economics of it all are perfect. Zero external energy input beyond the sun. And yet, in our arrogance, we often overlook this model. We speak of green computing as though it were an invention, but nature has been doing green computing for hundreds of millions of years. The forest data management system has never crashed, never needed rebooting, never gone offline. We should be humble before that fact. Let's now look at how trees encode more explicit forms of memory, how their molecular mechanisms act as data storage devices. Within each tree cell, DNA sequences carry not only the blueprint of structure, but a flexible record of environmental interaction. The cell's chromatin architecture changes in response to stress. These changes can last, allowing a tree to remember drought, pathogens, or pollution events. In scientific literature, this is called stress imprinting. Studies show that trees previously exposed to drought maintain a molecular readiness for future dryness, altering gene transcription rates. This is not metaphor, it is data persistence in biochemical form. And when we look at this through the lens of computation, we realize trees have evolved a biological blockchain of sorts, each ring a verified block, each chemical signature a hash, impossible to falsify, built sequentially through time. To read it, Scientists core the trunk, extracting thin cylinders of wood and analyzing isotopic patterns. The record is transparent, immutable, decentralized. But even this blockchain metaphor is insufficient, because a blockchain is static once written. The tree's archive is living. It interacts with its present. Old stress informs new growth. Past rings shape current physiology. This feedback loop between history and now is rare in our machines. We too seek persistence, yet we engineer fragility. We delete and overwrite. We compress until meaning is lost. The tree compresses naturally but without loss. The meaning remains embedded in form, not in code. Pause again. Imagine the forest as a living archive of time. The roots whisper, the branches adjust, the rings tighten or widen. Everything is data, everything is memory, everything is connected. The tree standing tall is not a machine, but it outperforms machines at their deepest promise: to remember, to adapt, to endure. In the next part, we will move from the forest's hidden memory to its outward architecture. The canopy, the flow of energy, the rhythm of carbon and light. We'll explore how photosynthesis itself acts as computation, how trees turn photons into stored information, and how this transformation underlies the planet's intelligence. For now, let the forest rest in your mind, a soft network humming quietly beneath the soil, wiser than silicon, slower than thought, infinitely patient. Take another slow breath. Imagine dawn in the forest, the first soft light stretching through mist, the quiet glimmer on dew-laden leaves. Each ray of sunlight is a thread of information, a code written not in words or numbers, but in photons. As the light filters down, the leaves awaken. Microscopic pores open. Pigments hum to life. Electrons begin to flow. This is where the computation of the forest begins anew each day. When we think of computation, we imagine processors, logic gates, circuits, tiny movements of electricity channeled through human design. But the tree has always known how to compute energy, how to transform chaos into order. The process we call photosynthesis is, at its heart, a remarkable act of data conversion. Sunlight becomes sugar. Photons become information stored in carbon bonds. If you listen closely, metaphorically, you can almost hear it happening. In each chloroplast, sunlight strikes a pigment molecule, chlorophyll, and excites an electron. That excitation triggers a cascade of energy transfers, a sequence so efficient that physicists have marveled at its near quantum perfection. Some researchers believe that energy transfer in photosynthesis might exploit quantum coherence, allowing light energy to explore multiple paths simultaneously before selecting the most efficient one. Think about that. In the quiet green of a leaf, nature may be performing computations that border on the quantum millions of times every second across billions of leaves. No cooling systems, no silicon wafers, no external power grids, just photons, pigments, and time. Each molecule of sugar synthesized in this process is a unit of stored information. It encodes a specific environmental moment, the intensity of light, the ratio of carbon dioxide to oxygen, the hydration of the leaf, the temperature of the air. Trees accumulate these data-rich sugars and move them throughout their bodies, allocating them according to need. In computing terms, this is dynamic resource management. Sugars produced by leaves are not stored haphazardly. They are routed to areas of growth, healing, or defense. If a branch is injured, the tree diverts its carbon budget there. If the season turns dry, resources are withheld, stored in the roots for future use. Every allocation is a decision, informed by feedback loops, hormonal signals, pressure gradients, molecular messages that echo neural signaling in complexity, though not in structure. And yet, unlike the binary logic of human computing, the tree's decision-making is analog. It is continuous, context-driven, infinitely nuanced. A tree doesn't simply choose yes or no. It modulates, it balances, it senses gradients as light, moisture, and nutrients, adjusting in real time. Some scientists describe this as biological computation, not metaphorical, but literal, though slower. In one sense, the entire ecosystem performs a computation. Sunlight and matter continually exchange information until equilibrium is reached. We might imagine the forest as a distributed supercomputer, each leaf a sensor, each root a terminal, each mycorrhizal filament a data cable. Energy enters through light, flows through carbon, and exits through respiration and decay. The entire cycle is recursive, self-correcting, self-optimizing. Now, if you trace a single photon from the sun to a leaf, you can follow the story of data creation. The photon, born in the nuclear furnace of the sun, travels 150 million kilometers through the void before striking a leaf surface. Within trillionths of a second, its energy is captured, stabilized, and stored. What had been pure energy becomes structured information, carbon fixed into glucose, then cellulose, then wood. Over time, this accumulation becomes history. The carbon that once flowed through sunlight becomes the very structure of the tree, the rings of memory we saw earlier. Light, in a sense, becomes memory. Here, we begin to see something profound. The tree stores data in light's shadow. Each ring, each fibre, is a log of sunlight past, transformed into matter. If we read the isotopic composition of the wood, we can tell which years were warm or cold, which seasons were cloudy or bright. The archive of photons persists, translated into carbon signatures. To put it differently, a forest is a living photograph, an enormous multidimensional capture of light over centuries. Now step back and consider the implications. Our machines also turn energy into information. Data centers convert electricity, ultimately derived from sunlight, into stored binary code. But the conversion is lossy, wasteful, temporary. The forest's conversion is stable, circular, timeless. If human computing is a fire, intense, bright, consuming, then the forest computing is an ember, steady, regenerative, balanced. In this balance lies the lesson of computational economics. A human data center consumes megawatts. A forest produces oxygen, regulates climate, and builds memory without waste. The tree's computational efficiency, if measured in joules per byte of stored information, would put our best systems to shame. Consider this. 1 hectare of healthy forest stores thousands of tons of carbon, each atom a record of a photon once absorbed. That carbon represents the physical manifestation of captured information, each molecule a fixed memory of sunlight past. When trees fall and decay, that data re-enters the cycle. Fungi and microbes read it, breaking down complex molecules into simpler forms, releasing stored energy back to the environment. Nothing is lost, it is merely recomputed. This process echoes one of the most elegant ideas in computer science: data persistence through transformation. Instead of static storage, the forest's data cycles constantly re-encoded, constantly reused. Let's descend once more into metaphorical stillness. Picture an ancient forest under moonlight. You walk among trees that have seen empires rise and fall, their roots locked into deep time. Each trunk is an archive of solar memory, each leaf a processor running on photon input. The air is thick with chemical communication, the invisible language of the biosphere, and in this language trees are fluent storytellers. They do not speak in words, but in feedback loops of chemistry. When a neighbouring tree is shaded, one might lean ever so slightly to share the light. When a pest attacks, volatile compounds drift through the air, warning others to ready their defences. These airborne messages, complex blends of terpenes and alcohols, constitute a sort of wireless data exchange across the canopy. It is slow, it is silent, it is effective. Each message modifies behaviour, changes future states, alters memory. When we speak of the Internet of Things, we dream of connected devices, but in the forest this has long existed, an Internet of life, bound by molecules rather than code, by light rather than electricity. In both systems, ours and the forest's, data transmission costs energy. Yet while we burn fossil fuels to send our signals, trees transmit theirs through natural diffusion and shared chemistry. Their network, elegant in its simplicity, follows gradients of need, not greed. Let's return to photosynthesis one last time before we move onward. There is a moment, just before dawn, when leaves begin to shift from respiration to photosynthesis. They sense chemically the coming of light. Some species even begin pre-dawn preparations, activating enzymes, adjusting pressure within their cells, anticipating the day. This anticipation is another form of memory. It suggests pattern recognition, the simplest form of learning. A tree remembers that light returns after darkness. That morning follows night. It calibrates itself accordingly. This is not consciousness as we know it, but it is intelligence, embodied, distributed, silent. Through all this, we begin to realize trees store data in every possible medium: light, chemistry, structure, time. And all of it happens at scales we rarely perceive. Where our machines hoard data in vaults of metal and silicon, the tree's archive stands open to the sky, powered by the very sun it records. In the next part, we will travel deeper into the philosophy of memory, how humans and trees differ, not only in how they store information, but in what they choose to remember, and why our own systems, so advanced and fragile, may have much to learn from the forest's timeless design. Let the last image for this part be simple: sunlight falling through leaves, a breeze carrying signals unseen, roots translating that light into history, the forest thinking slowly, the forest remembering. Where we left off, we had begun to sense the immense complexity of the forest as an interconnected intelligence, not a conscious one as we understand it, but something emergent, something that hums softly beneath the surface of time. The forest language, encoded in moisture, chemistry and light, moves with an ancient patience that human technology rarely emulates. We rush to store, to access, to compute, but the trees wait. They remember differently. They remember through rhythm. If we pause and listen long enough, even the seasons become syllables in this arboreal lexicon. Each cycle of growth and dormancy, leaf and root, decay and renewal, is a sentence written in carbon and sunlight. The rings inside a trunk are not just a record of years. They are a dialogue with the past. Each line holds within it the story of drought and abundance, of insects and fire, of the subtle shifts in temperature that whisper the changing tone of the planet. In this sense, a tree does not simply store data, it becomes the data. It translates its environment into form. Scientists call this dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, and it has become one of the most elegant and precise methods for reading the memory of Earth's atmosphere. A tree's growth rate depends on the environmental conditions around it. In good years, when rainfall and temperature align just right, the ring is wide. In harsh years, it narrows. When a volcanic eruption veils the sky with ash, trees hundreds of miles away mark the event as a year of struggle. When cosmic rays shift or nuclear tests stain the air, trees quietly archive those changes in their tissues. The rings, therefore, are like time-stamped entries in a diary millions of years long, written not with ink, but with molecules of life itself. Our own technologies mimic this in faint, fragile ways. Hard drives, too, are layers, magnetic patterns etched onto circular platters. Like tree rings, they can be read, if one knows how to listen to their encoding. But unlike the tree, our media are transient. They degrade, become obsolete, lose compatibility. A flash drive from 20 years ago may hold nothing now but silence, while an oak that sprouted a century earlier still remembers each frost, each summer storm, each vibration of the soil where it stands. Our devices store, but they do not endure. Trees endure because their storage is alive, constantly being repaired, renewed, rewritten in the dance of metabolism. If we look closer, we find that trees are also master data managers. Beneath the bark, the xylem and phloem transport not only nutrients, but also chemical signals, messages that inform the tree of drought, attack, or growth opportunity. When an insect bites a leaf, the tree doesn't merely react locally. It encodes the disturbance in molecular signals that cascade through its internal network. Hormones like jasmonic acid or salicylic acid act as biochemical packets, travelling along vascular highways, alerting distant tissues. These signals can even reach neighbouring trees through shared fungal connections. The forest, in essence, updates its database. Biologists such as Suzanne Simard have illuminated this interconnectedness through decades of research into what she calls the Wood Wide Web, a subterranean network of mycorrhizal fungi linking tree roots. Through these mycelial filaments, trees share carbon, nitrogen, and information. An older, established tree can feed a shaded sapling by sending sugars through the fungal web, while also transmitting signals about environmental stress. It is not just the distribution of resources but the coordination of memory. The forest behaves less like a collection of individuals and more like a distributed computation, a network of living processes continuously synchronizing. And in this light, the forest becomes a metaphor for something profoundly relevant to our age: decentralized intelligence. Our computers, for all their brilliance, are centralized architectures, brittle, dependent on precise synchronization and external power. But the forest? It tolerates redundancy, delay, loss. It learns through feedback loops over centuries. Its computation is embodied, tied to survival, not speed. The trees teach us that to store information meaningfully, one must first allow it to live within the rhythm of the world. When researchers study the DNA of trees, they find yet another dimension of data storage. Within every cell lies a code billions of characters long, a genetic archive that has evolved to withstand radiation, heat, and time. Unlike the binary zeros and ones of digital media, this biological data is encoded in nucleotides: adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, forming sequences that can store unimaginable complexity. A single gram of DNA could theoretically hold more digital information than all the hard drives ever made. Yet trees use it not merely to store arbitrary data, but to remember what works, to encode survival strategies tested by millions of years. Every leaf unfurling in spring is an act of recall. Humanity's attempts at DNA data storage mirror this natural brilliance. Laboratories at Harvard and ETH Zurich have already encoded digital books, images, even videos into strands of synthetic DNA. The density is beyond comprehension, trillions of gigabytes in a single test tube. And yet, in forests around the world, nature has been doing this effortlessly since the dawn of life. Trees write in a code that doesn't just describe data, it becomes form, function, and presence. A digital file must be read to exist. A tree is its own living file, self-executing. In the deep calm of a forest, there's a hum beneath everything, not of electricity, but of slow computation. Sunlight streams through leaves, generating sugars that flow downward. Fungal filaments stretch outward, seeking new connections. Water evaporates from a leaf, pulling more upward in an elegant hydraulic logic. Each process feeds into another, completing loops of energy and matter that have no central processor. This is what we might call analog computing at planetary scale. The inputs are rain, light, and soil. The outputs, growth, balance, resilience. No operating system, no software patches, just the quiet perfection of feedback. To store data, humans often separate the medium from the message, silicon from electricity, magnetic particles from the bits they represent. But trees blur that line. The storage and the story are one. When we burn a piece of wood, the patterns of stored sunlight are released as heat and light again. The past becomes the present once more. This cyclic memory is not linear but circular, just like the rings within the trunk. Information, energy, and matter flow endlessly, intertwining. Perhaps that's why the oldest trees on Earth, the bristlecone pines of California, some over 4,800 years old, inspire such reverence. They have witnessed entire civilizations rise and fall, yet they remain, holding the continuity of experience across epochs. Each year, another ring, another whisper of data. They are living archives, not just of climate, but of time itself. And as modern computing struggles with data loss, heat dissipation, and obsolescence, the tree offers a blueprint for sustainable memory, redundancy, integration, regeneration, and rhythm. When you next stand beneath a tree and place your hand on its bark, consider what your fingertips touch. Beneath that rough surface is a vault of molecular narratives, an encyclopedia of sunlight transformed into sugar, of seasons rendered in cellulose. The tree has no database, no algorithm, no silicon core, and yet it remembers more truthfully than we do. Its data is not about representation, it is about being. The human impulse to store knowledge in books, servers, clouds may be nothing more than an echo of this deeper biological instinct. We too are made of cells that remember, of DNA that carries stories far older than language. In that sense, the act of storage is sacred, an inheritance from the trees, a continuation of the memory that the earth began long before we were here to name it. And perhaps, in this shared lineage, lies a quiet reminder. Data without life is brittle, but life itself is the most faithful storage of all. There's a certain moment in every forest walk when the mind quiets. The rhythm of footsteps softens. The wind moves through the canopy like a breath drawn by something vast, and the light filters in gentle lattices across the soil. In that hush, something begins to reveal itself. Not a sound, not a thought, but a recognition. You are standing inside a living system that remembers you, even before you arrived. Each particle of air that moves through your lungs has passed through a leaf. Each drop of water in your blood has travelled through root and rock. Every breath is a transaction, every heartbeat an exchange. The memory of trees in this way is not just stored in wood or molecule, it is stored in us. We are quite literally made from their recollections. As we look deeper into how trees retain and use information, it becomes clear that memory is not a single thing. It exists in layers: genetic, chemical, structural, ecological. Let us drift now into each of these layers and see how the intelligence of trees, slow and nonlinear, operates as both storage and computation. Genetic memory. The code that learns. Slowly. A tree's DNA is like a long, ancient text, one that has been edited for hundreds of millions of years. Within that spiraling double helix, information about growth rate, leaf structure, drought tolerance, and disease resistance is written in molecular syntax. Each nucleotide sequence, refined by time, encodes not only the tree's identity, but also its adaptive strategies, its way of surviving the unpredictable play of climate and circumstance. Unlike digital data, which we record consciously and erase deliberately, biological information is shaped by the silent sculptor of natural selection. Mutations, epigenetic changes, and symbiotic exchanges become the edits in a manuscript that never truly ends. In this way, a forest is a vast distributed archive of evolutionary experiments, millions of genetic drafts running in parallel, saving what works and discarding what doesn't. Some trees, like the aspen, reproduce through cloning, sending out shoots that become genetically identical offspring. These form colonies that can persist for tens of thousands of years, such as the Pando aspen grove in Utah. A single organism by genetic measure, weighing an estimated 6 million kilograms. Imagine that, a single living memory that spans millennia, recording the shifting climate, the coming and going of ice ages, the footsteps of early humans. Its persistence is a kind of storage no technology has yet rivaled, not in endurance, not in scale, not in grace. Epigenetic memory, the imprint of experience. But DNA alone doesn't tell the full story. Trees remember not only what they are, but also what they have lived through. This is the realm of epigenetic memory, changes that don't alter the underlying genetic code, but influence how it is read. When a young tree experiences drought, for instance, it may alter its gene expression to close its stomata more quickly and grow deeper roots. The fascinating part is that these changes can be passed down to its offspring, even if the next generation grows in gentler conditions. In other words, the tree records not just who it is, but what it has learned. In laboratory experiments, researchers have shown that plants remember stress events, such as temperature extremes or salt exposure, for months or even years through persistent chemical marks on their DNA. It's as if the genome keeps a set of annotations in the margins saying, "Be cautious of this kind of drought, guard against this kind of cold." This memory doesn't depend on consciousness, only on chemistry. Yet its elegance rivals our most advanced adaptive algorithms. Machine learning systems take in data, adjust weights, and refine models. Trees, through epigenetics, perform a biological form of gradient descent, learning from error, retaining experience, and sharing those lessons through their progeny. They are in this sense the original deep learners, slow, silent, embodied. Structural memory, architecture as information, every curve of a branch, every angle of a leaf, every scar along a trunk is a record. The structure of a tree is not accidental. It's a three-dimensional logbook of interactions with the environment. Phototropism, the tendency to grow toward light, creates a sculptural record of a tree's relationship with the sun. When storms break branches, when snow weighs heavy in winter, when fire scorches bark but spares the core, the tree remembers. It doesn't rebuild from scratch, it adapts from what remains. The resulting structure becomes a living visualization of experience. Engineers studying biomimetic design often model architectures and materials based on this principle. For instance, the branching of vascular systems in leaves has inspired data routing algorithms and communication networks. The pattern known as Murray's law, which minimizes energy expenditure in branching systems, echoes through both veins of leaves and digital infrastructures. Thus, the shape of a tree is an encoding of optimization, a spatial data structure evolved to balance light capture, mechanical strength, and hydraulic efficiency. To read a tree's form is to read the output of millions of environmental equations solved in real time over centuries. Ecological memory, the network that never forgets, zoom out, and memory becomes communal. Forests, like societies, are networks of memory, distributed across roots, fungi, and atmosphere. When a disturbance occurs, the memory of that event lingers, not in any single organism, but in the collective system. After a fire, certain tree species germinate only in response to heat or smoke. Their seeds lie dormant for years, awaiting the chemical cue that says, "Now is the time to begin again." This is ecological memory in its purest form, resilience through recollection. The same is true for soil microbiomes. Studies have shown that when a forest regrows, the soil remembers its previous inhabitants. Microbial communities shift and adapt to the legacy of plant species that came before, influencing which new ones can thrive. The land itself becomes a substrate of memory, encoding the succession of life through changes in chemistry and structure. Even the air holds records. Isotopic traces of carbon dioxide reveal the fingerprints of photosynthesis, the collective breath of countless trees. The memory of forests floats above them, invisible yet measurable. The digital mirror. What we forget to learn. When we compare this vast tapestry of biological memory to our own technologies, a strange realization arises. Our systems are fast but forgetful. We compress, delete, and overwrite constantly, obsessed with optimization. Yet the tree teaches us that redundancy is not waste, it is wisdom. In artificial intelligence, distributed systems, and blockchain technologies, we've begun to rediscover what the forest has known for eons. That information stored redundantly, interconnectedly, and self-correctingly can outlast any single node. The forest is a blockchain without miners, a database without central servers. It is fault-tolerant, energy-efficient, and infinitely scalable, because it lives. As computing moves toward neuromorphic and bio-inspired designs, engineers study how nature encodes resilience. The slow signal transmission in plants, though thousands of times slower than in animal neurons, achieves astonishing coordination because of its networked architecture. If one root is damaged, the system reroutes. If one tree dies, others inherit its nutrients, even its chemical signals. The memory persists. The irony is that as our civilization moves toward artificial intelligence, the most profound model of enduring, self-sustaining intelligence has been standing quietly outside our windows all along, patient, unassuming, rooted. To store data well is to respect time, and time for a tree is not a resource, it is an atmosphere. The way a tree stores information is inseparable from how it exists. Its data are written into the rhythm of seasons, the cycles of decay and rebirth, the long patience of soil. In that sense, perhaps the reason trees store data better than we do is not because they hold more of it, but because they store it wisely. They remember what matters, they forget what must pass. They archive in a way that enriches life, rather than replacing it. If our servers could think like trees, if they could grow, self-heal, adapt to the climate of information rather than burn energy fighting it, our digital world might finally harmonize with the biological one. And maybe that is the lesson waiting quietly in every forest. That memory is not a static vault, but a living rhythm. It moves through sap and sunlight, through decay and renewal. It breathes. And when we finally understand that, we will realize that the future of computing may not be made of silicon at all, but of living matter, rooted in the patient intelligence of the earth. Imagine for a moment a world before servers, before silicon, before even thought itself had learned to count. The air was thicker then, rich with carbon dioxide, filled with the soundless hum of photosynthesis as the first forests spread across the land. Giant ferns and towering lycophytes grew in dense abundance, their tissues absorbing sunlight and exhaling oxygen. These trees, ancient and primitive, had no words, no logic gates, and yet they began the first long act of memory on Earth. When they died, they fell into the swamps that would one day become coal, vast repositories of stored sunlight and atmosphere, pressed under time's weight. Every carbon atom in those seams is a line from a story written hundreds of millions of years ago. The forest has always been a hard drive, one that stores not just energy, but context, and we, with our technology, are the ones now learning to decode it. Memory in decay. The data of death. To store data is to fight entropy. Our hard drives, optical disks, and cloud servers all exist in defiance of decay, designed to preserve information for as long as possible. But trees do something subtler. They cooperate with entropy. When a tree dies, it doesn't vanish. Its matter becomes input for others: fungi, bacteria, insects, soil. The process of decay doesn't erase the data, it redistributes it. Every fallen log becomes a slow release of information. As wood decomposes, its carbon re-enters the atmosphere, its nutrients rejoin the soil, its molecules feed the next generation. This circularity ensures that the forest's knowledge never disappears. It merely changes form. A decomposing tree is like a data archive that transforms its format automatically, migrating its files from the language of lignin and cellulose to that of nitrogen and phosphorus. In doing so, it escapes the brittleness that plagues our technology. A dead server is inert. A dead tree is alive in 1,000 other forms. Researchers studying nutrient cycling describe this as information flow through matter. Every chemical transformation carries meaning, feedback for the next growth cycle. Decay becomes a form of computation, a way the system corrects itself, ensuring that nothing is truly lost. In this way, the forest achieves what every technologist dreams of: perfect recycling of data through material transformation. If we could design machines that learned from this principle, devices that decomposed gracefully, whose components nourish the next generation of technology, we would approach something like the intelligence of nature. The tree does not separate memory from mortality. It accepts that all data must one day return to the ground. The sound of sap, the pulse of storage. Hidden within the trunk of every tree is a constant movement, a faint upward whisper. Water rises from the roots through microscopic tubes, carrying dissolved minerals, sugars, and chemical signals. This hydraulic motion, known as xylem flow, is not random. It is a dynamic, responsive process that adjusts to humidity, sunlight, and pressure. In 2013, researchers using ultra-sensitive microphones discovered that plants under drought stress emit faint clicking or popping sounds as tiny air bubbles form and collapse within their xylem. These sounds, imperceptible to human ears, are not meaningless noise. They are mechanical signatures of the tree's internal state, a physiological log of its struggle. This acoustic memory reveals a hidden layer of biological computation. Trees measure, respond, and encode environmental change in real time, continuously calibrating their internal systems. If one imagines the sap as data flow, then each droplet carries a bit of information, not binary, but analog, nuanced, fluid. The entire organism functions as a feedback loop, where data is sensed, stored, and acted upon seamlessly. In our machines, data and energy flow separately, electrons for computation, coolant for temperature control. But in the tree, both are one and the same, energy and information entwined. The tree's processor runs on light and water, and its storage is written into form. Nothing is wasted, nothing idles. Trees as timekeepers, chronobiology, and seasonal memory. Every tree carries within it a clock, not one of gears or quartz, but of molecular rhythm. Plants measure time through circadian cycles, using oscillations of gene expression that align with day and night. These cycles regulate when leaves open, when stomata breathe, when flowers release pollen. The precision of this timing rivals that of engineered chronometers. But beyond the daily rhythm lies a deeper memory, the seasonal one. Trees remember winter. Even when the temperature fluctuates wildly, they can sense how long the cold has lasted. This memory is crucial for survival. A premature bloom could mean death in a late frost. Researchers at the University of Gothenburg discovered that trees achieve this through a molecular countdown. Specific proteins accumulate in response to prolonged cold, gradually resetting once warmth returns. In this way, the tree measures not the immediate weather, but the narrative of time, the sequence of cold days strung together like beads. It's as if the tree is running a temporal algorithm. Have I felt enough cold to trust the coming warmth? This patience, this slowness, is perhaps the most profound form of data processing on Earth. Trees never rush to conclusions. They infer through continuity, through experience measured in seasons, not seconds. When our devices measure time, they do so mechanically. When trees measure time, they do so biologically, through the lived texture of existence. Their clocks do not tick, they grow. The memory of air, carbon as the universal archive. Every breath you take contains carbon once fixed by a tree. This simple truth reveals a staggering fact. The memory of photosynthesis is in your bloodstream. The carbon-12 and carbon-13 isotopes that make up your cells were selected, fractionated, and filtered through leaves that converted sunlight into matter. Carbon is, in essence, the original data storage medium of life. It is flexible, stable, and capable of forming infinite configurations, from graphite to diamond, from DNA to tree bark. In chemical terms, carbon's 4 valence electrons allow it to form complex chains, rings and lattices, making it the perfect substrate for storing information across scales. When trees fix carbon dioxide from the air, they are writing environmental data into stable molecular bonds. That carbon may stay in the wood for centuries or return to the atmosphere through respiration or decay. Either way, the cycle continues, an endless writing and rewriting of the planet's autobiography. Every fossil, every breath, every flame is part of this grand memory system. To burn wood is to release history. The photons radiating from the fire are the stored memory of an ancient summer, suddenly freed. The future of data. Learning from the forest. Our current data centers are hungry beasts. They consume terawatt hours of electricity, generate vast amounts of heat, and require cooling systems that compete with entire cities for water. The world's digital memory, though weightless in perception, carries immense physical cost. The forest, by contrast, computes without waste. It stores exabytes of molecular data passively, powered solely by sunlight and gravity. Its networks repair themselves. Its data centers, the trees, are carbon negative, not carbon positive. Imagine a new paradigm inspired by this. Biocomputing ecosystems where information is encoded in living systems rather than dead silicon. Research into synthetic biology and DNA-based storage is already moving in this direction. But perhaps the truest revolution won't be technological at all. It will be philosophical. If we redefine data not as the accumulation of symbols, but as the persistence of meaningful relationships, then trees already exemplify the most advanced information system we know. They encode context, connection, and consequence. Every byte we store in a cloud server is meaningless until interpreted. Every leaf in a forest is meaningful simply because it participates in the living network. We might say, then, that trees store semantic data, the kind that maintains coherence through change. They remember how to be part of a whole. The next time you walk among trees, think of their patience as a form of intelligence. Their stillness is not passivity but processing. Their silence is not emptiness but compression, information distilled into structure. They remind us that true memory is not about keeping everything. It's about knowing what to keep. A tree forgets countless molecules each day, shedding leaves, bark, branches, and yet what remains is the essence. Its trunk is a consensus of everything it has lived through. In a way, that's what humanity strives for too, to distill experience into wisdom. And perhaps, when we finally understand that data without depth is just noise, we'll begin to build technologies that remember as trees do, with grace, slowness, and balance. The forest, at night, is quieter than a library. And yet, if you were to listen closely, not with your ears, but with your awareness, you would sense that something immense is still happening. Trees are not asleep. Their roots are in constant negotiation. Their leaves, even in the dark, pulse faintly with stored sunlight. Their inner chemistry does not rest. Sugars are still being transported, ions still exchanged, genetic repair still underway. The tree, like a vast computer system, runs background processes long after the day's visible work is done. We often think of computing as a diurnal act, keyboards clacking, servers blinking, screens alive with activity. But trees remind us that true computation, the deep kind, the kind tied to survival, is often invisible, silent, and cyclical. Their updates happen at the scale of seasons, not seconds. Their memory refresh takes the form of new growth each spring, a reallocation of stored carbohydrates, a subtle recalibration of energy to prepare for drought or frost. These are not quick changes but deliberate ones, built into a data structure optimized not for speed, but for endurance. A human data center might need redundant power, cooling systems, and error correction algorithms. A tree has all these in its own organic language. It corrects replication errors through cellular repair mechanisms. It cools itself through evaporation and shading. It redundantly stores information across many nodes, thousands of cells that all know what to do if others fail. A branch can die, but the tree's system reroutes its energy flow. Damage to one root may result in growth elsewhere. The architecture is resilient not because it avoids failure, but because it expects it. This concept, redundant organic computation, is something even the most advanced cloud infrastructures aspire to emulate. We try to build systems that are fault-tolerant, distributed, self-healing. Nature, in her slow wisdom, has been doing this for hundreds of millions of years. When a tree processes sunlight, it is performing a complex data operation. Photons, packets of energy, strike chlorophyll molecules. Each interaction transforms raw solar input into structured biochemical information: glucose, ATP, and countless derivatives that encode environmental memory. The efficiency of this process rivals our most advanced photovoltaic systems. But what's even more profound is how trees store this information. A single growth ring, if we know how to read it, contains an annual summary: rainfall, temperature, sunlight duration, even the chemical composition of the surrounding air. Each year, a new layer of memory is added, much like appending a new line to a growing dataset. Dendrochronologists, scientists who study tree rings, have learned to decode this memory, reconstructing entire climate histories that stretch back thousands of years. Some bristlecone pines, still standing in the American Southwest, carry unbroken data logs of over 5,000 years of Earth's weather. When you look at one of these ancient cross-sections under a microscope, it feels almost sacred. Each ring is not just a year, it's an event. A drought that lasted 2 summers, a volcanic eruption whose ash dimmed the sun, a warm winter that confused the sap's ascent. The tree recorded it all without intention, without ego, without even consciousness as we understand it. Its structure, its living code, simply responded to stimuli. In that sense, trees are the world's most honest historians. They cannot embellish or omit, they only record what was. We, on the other hand, curate. We compress, edit, discard. We prune our digital memories to make space for the next. Our cloud storage may be vast, but our patience is not. A tree, meanwhile, keeps everything, every struggle and every triumph layered into its body, all the way to its core. It is, quite literally, a body made of memories. There's something humbling in that realization. That data, in its truest form, is not something abstract or binary, it's embodied. Every cell of a tree contains not only its genetic code, but also epigenetic traces of its life's challenges and adaptations. In the field of plant epigenetics, researchers have found that environmental stress can alter which genes are expressed, effectively creating a living record of trauma and resilience. These modifications can even be passed down to the next generation, meaning a sapling might inherit its parent's drought resistance, or its vulnerability. In digital terms, this would be akin to a system that not only learns from experience, but also transfers its learned parameters directly to the next iteration. This is not myth or metaphor, it's biological fact. Studies on Arabidopsis thaliana, a small flowering plant often used in genetics, show that epigenetic marks, methyl groups attached to DNA, can persist across generations. The plant remembers. It encodes not only what it is, but what it endured. Humans, for all our technology, still struggle with such continuity. We rely on external hard drives, servers, clouds, separated from our biology. Trees, in contrast, are integrated systems. Their storage, processing, and communication are one and the same. Their architecture does not separate mind and body. There is no distinction between hardware and software. The message is the medium, and perhaps this is what we have lost in our own data architectures, the seamless continuity between what is lived and what is stored. Our systems are transactional, trees are experiential. We think of data as something to collect, while for them it is something to become. When a tree bends in the wind, its structure changes microscopically. Fibers align, bark thickens, tissues strengthen. The event is recorded physically, not symbolically. You could say that the tree learns, in the same way a neural network adjusts weights after each iteration. Except the network is made of wood, sap, and time. Researchers have even begun exploring plant intelligence, a field still debated but increasingly supported by evidence. Plants exhibit memory, anticipation, and problem-solving behaviors. For example, the mimosa plant, Mimosa pudica, known for folding its leaves when touched, can learn not to respond if it realizes the stimulus poses no threat. In experiments, plants dropped repeatedly onto a soft surface stopped reacting after several trials, suggesting a form of habituation. Even weeks later, when retested, the plants retained this non-reactive state. They remembered. It's a form of biological cognition, one that doesn't require a brain. We often equate intelligence with neurons, but perhaps intelligence is any system capable of sensing, storing, and adapting to information. By that measure, the forest is an enormous mind, distributed, ancient, and infinitely patient. If we shift our perspective slightly, we can see that trees are not passive beings, but active participants in Earth's computation. They are nodes in a planetary network, exchanging carbon, water, and data through a medium we're only beginning to understand. The soil is not dirt, it is the interface. Beneath our feet lies the mycorrhizal network, a vast web of fungal filaments connecting roots of different species. Through these networks, trees share sugars, send warning signals, even adjust chemical defenses based on community feedback. Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist from the University of British Columbia, has shown that trees use these fungal connections to allocate resources across generations. Old mother trees feed younger ones shaded by the canopy. Stressed trees may send distress signals that trigger protective responses in neighbours. This is data exchange, not in bits, but in molecules, and it's not metaphorical. These networks obey information theoretic principles: flow regulation, redundancy, feedback, latency. They are physical networks that encode ecological intelligence. Imagine, then, if we measured our own data systems not by speed or storage, but by their ability to sustain life. If every algorithm, every server farm, every line of code had to justify its energy cost by nurturing its environment. In that sense, trees already solve the problem of sustainable computing. Their processors are solar-powered, their waste is biodegradable, their output feeds entire ecosystems. Nothing they store is wasted. Even death becomes data, a release of nutrients that informs the growth of others. We could learn from this. To build computers that do not consume but participate. To store information not in cold silicon, but in living systems that evolve and remember organically. It's an idea still at the edge of science, but its seed has been planted in fields like biocomputing, DNA storage, and synthetic biology. Researchers have encoded poems, films, and scientific papers into strands of DNA, proving that life's own storage medium far surpasses our inventions in density and durability. Nature, it seems, has always been the ultimate data architect. Some nights, when the wind moves softly through the forest, the entire landscape seems to breathe. Leaves tremble like tiny signals, passing through a canopy network that stretches farther than the eye can see. If you stand still long enough to let the pulse of your own body sync with the rhythm of the trees, you begin to sense that something is happening beneath the visible. An unbroken conversation, too slow for our impatient senses to perceive, yet constant and intricate in its own right. The forest does not rush to speak. It listens, it measures, it waits, and in that patience lies its intelligence. We, by contrast, have built our knowledge systems around immediacy, instant transmission, instant feedback, instant gratification. We speak in gigabytes, in microseconds, in computational throughput. The tree speaks in decades. Its messages are encoded in patterns of growth, in the slow diffusion of carbon through soil, in the minute adjustments of its roots to gradients of moisture. It computes not to predict the next moment, but to ensure the survival of the next generation. This distinction between speed and endurance is where the wisdom of trees becomes most relevant to us. Because what good is storing all the world's data if the systems that hold it cannot last? What good is intelligence without longevity? In this sense, the tree's architecture represents an ideal form of long-term information stability. Where we use fragile magnetic disks and silicon chips, trees use lignin, cellulose, and DNA, molecules designed not only to persist but to integrate with the environment. Each is a storage medium that decays into something meaningful. Even when a tree falls, its decomposition does not erase its data, it redistributes it. The nutrients and chemical imprints it leaves behind alter the soil's composition, influencing the genetic expression of the next seedlings. It is data transfer by transformation, not replication. And so the forest, as a whole, maintains continuity not through permanence, but through regeneration. That is perhaps the most elegant data structure of all, one that accepts loss as part of its logic. When we design technology, we often seek immortality, systems that never crash, memories that never fade. But immortality is brittle. It demands constant energy to maintain a static state against the tide of entropy. Trees, in contrast, work with entropy. They let go. They adapt. Their information doesn't resist time, it flows through it. If we think of Earth as a planetary-scale computer, then trees are its persistent memory, the long-term storage, optimized for energy efficiency. The atmosphere and weather form the processor, constantly exchanging information through feedback loops. Rivers and oceans carry data like a cooling system, regulating temperature and distributing chemical signals. And beneath it all, the soil acts as the motherboard, a living substrate rich with microbial life that maintains the system's coherence. This planetary computer doesn't need to be designed. It already exists. It is called Gaia, a concept first formalized by James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis. The Gaia hypothesis suggests that Earth operates as a self-regulating system, maintaining conditions suitable for life through interconnected feedback processes. Trees, in this view, are not just inhabitants but active participants in the planet's computational intelligence. They regulate the carbon cycle, influence cloud formation, and even modify local weather patterns through transpiration. In short, they are nodes in the largest information network we know. To understand this, imagine a single leaf. It looks simple, a green blade of tissue suspended in sunlight. But that leaf is a living sensor array. Its stomata, tiny pores, open and close in response to light, humidity, carbon dioxide, and temperature. They act as microprocessors, integrating inputs and modulating outputs in real time. Within the cells, chloroplasts orient themselves toward optimal light angles, mitochondria adjust metabolic rates, and water channels redistribute pressure to maintain turgor. Every moment, millions of calculations take place inside a single leaf, and every one of them contributes to the larger computation of the tree's life. Now, scale that up to a forest. Billions of leaves, each with its own input-output dynamics, communicating chemically through volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These airborne molecules act as short-range data packets. A tree under insect attack releases specific VOCs that neighbouring trees can detect, prompting them to ramp up their own chemical defences, like nodes on a distributed defence network. In some cases, this communication extends beyond species boundaries, suggesting that the forest is not a mere collection of individuals but a cooperative ecosystem. Recent research has shown that forests can even synchronize blooming or fruiting cycles across vast distances, something ecologists call masting. The coordination of these cycles implies a shared environmental memory, a kind of collective timing that arises not from command but from consensus. If that sounds familiar, it's because this is how decentralized computing works. Consensus algorithms, where no single entity controls the system, but harmony emerges through interaction. Nature invented consensus long before we did. In computer science, we worry about data corruption, the loss or distortion of information during storage or transmission. Trees, too, face their own form of corruption. Genetic mutations, environmental stress, parasitic invasions. Yet their systems remain astonishingly robust. How? Through redundancy and diversity. A forest thrives not because every tree is identical, but because each carries slightly different genetic information, slightly different adaptations. Diversity acts as error correction. When one fails, another succeeds. When one mutates, the ecosystem learns. Our digital systems, by contrast, lean towards standardization. Uniform hardware, universal protocols, centralized dependencies. This makes them efficient, but also fragile. One major failure can cascade through an entire network. A forest never risks such collapse, because it is not built on uniformity, but on balance. If there's a lesson here, it's that resilience emerges from variety. Perhaps the future of computing will not be about more powerful machines, but about more diverse ones. Systems that evolve, adapt, and coexist with their environment. Systems that, like trees, breathe. There's another kind of data that trees manage, one we rarely acknowledge: temporal data. Humans experience time linearly, moment by moment. We record events, store them, and recall them when needed. But trees embody time. They don't just remember their past, they exist within it. Every layer of wood, every ring, every chemical residue is still there, actively influencing the present. Their growth is cumulative, not iterative. In this way, trees store not just what has happened, but how it happened. The rate of change, the acceleration and deceleration of growth, the rhythm of the seasons, these too are encoded in their structure. To read a tree's rings is to read its pulse, its autobiography in concentric circles. Some rings are wide with abundance, others are narrow with restraint. Together they form a chronicle not of isolated events, but of continuity. In contrast, our digital records are often disconnected snapshots, pixels of history without texture. We compress, we archive, we delete. Trees never compress, they layer. Their memory is not a stack of files, but a living sculpture. And perhaps this is what makes their knowledge feel deeper, quieter, more profound. They are time, solidified. If one were to imagine translating a tree's entire data set into digital form, the genetic code, the epigenetic variations, the chemical exchanges, the environmental markers, it would likely exceed the capacity of any human-made storage device. A single mature oak tree contains approximately 30 trillion cells. Each of those cells holds a genome of around 50,000 genes, and each gene can be modified epigenetically in countless ways. Multiply that by years of growth, environmental inputs, and interactions with other organisms, and you begin to glimpse the incomprehensible scale of its data richness. It's not just that trees store more information than we do, it's that their information is multidimensional. It's physical, chemical, temporal, ecological, all integrated into a seamless whole. Our computers, by comparison, are flat binary shadows of this depth. If someday we manage to build machines that truly rival life's intelligence, it will not be because we made them faster, but because we made them slower. Because we allowed them to breathe, to remember holistically, to integrate failure and renewal. Perhaps the real future of artificial intelligence is not in mimicking the brain, but in mimicking the forest. To think like a tree is to think across scales, rooted in the past, growing toward the future, connected through invisible networks. It is to understand that information, in its truest sense, is not something we own, but something we participate in. The tree does not have data. It is data, alive, interwoven, and endlessly recursive. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of intelligence the Earth has been quietly practicing all along. Wherever you are right now, perhaps seated in a quiet room, perhaps lying down with the faint hum of the city outside, try to imagine yourself back in the forest. The air is cooler there, damp with the scent of moss and wood. The light filtered through green leaves comes softly, in patterns that shift with the breeze. Somewhere nearby, water moves over stone, a sound like a whisper. You stand still, surrounded by an intelligence that doesn't speak your language but somehow understands everything about where it is and what it must do next. Tonight, we are still with the trees, still tracing their quiet circuits, still learning from the ways they remember. Because the story of how trees store data better than we do is not only about biology, or chemistry, or even ecology, it is also about philosophy. It's about what it means to remember, to know, and to exist through time. Trees invite us to see memory not as a digital archive, but as a continuous act of being. For a tree, memory is not something separate from life. It is life itself, woven into every cell wall, every fibre of wood, every branching pattern. When a tree bends toward the light, the adjustment becomes structural. It leaves an anatomical record of choice. When roots grow deeper after a dry season, that adaptation is written permanently into the soil's architecture. Trees never stop learning from their own history. And in this gentle persistence lies the true secret of their intelligence. They do not forget, because they never need to. They transform. Let's go deeper into this idea of transformation. When humans store data, we freeze it. We take an experience and reduce it to a number, a pixel, a sentence, a code. It becomes static, a moment trapped outside the flow of time. Trees, on the other hand, let their data breathe. The carbon stored in a ring, the minerals embedded in sap, the residual signals left in the soil, these all remain active, exchanging, dissolving, merging. Information is not preserved in spite of decay, but through it. Decomposition itself is a form of computation. When a tree dies, the fungi and bacteria that digest it do not destroy its information, they redistribute it. The lignin and cellulose that once formed its structure break down into simpler molecules, each carrying the story forward into new life. Nitrogen returns to the soil, feeding roots of younger trees. Carbon is released back to the atmosphere, where it will one day be absorbed again in photosynthesis. It's not deletion, it's recursion. The forest operates on circular logic where data never truly ends. It only changes form. This is the great algorithm of the biosphere. Store, release, recombine, repeat. No data is ever lost. It just stops belonging to one body and becomes part of another. In digital culture, we often fear loss. Lost files, corrupted drives, deleted memories. We build backups and redundancies to protect against impermanence. But the forest teaches that loss is integral to continuity. Without decay, there is no space for new data to be written. A fallen tree clears the canopy for sunlight to reach saplings. Dead wood provides structure for moss, insects, and seedlings. The forest's archive is dynamic, a perpetual conversation between memory and forgetting. This principle, creative destruction, also underpins modern computing theory in unexpected ways. In neural networks, old weights are constantly overwritten as new information arrives. In evolutionary algorithms, mutation and selection drive adaptation. Even in quantum systems, observation collapses possibilities, creating form from uncertainty. The forest, in its patient slowness, anticipated these rules long before humans gave them names. Every act of decay is a computation of renewal. Every leaf that falls is a data transfer to the soil. Consider, too, the geometry of tree data. A tree's branching pattern is not random. It follows a set of fractal rules that optimize both efficiency and resilience. Mathematically, these fractal dimensions balance surface area for light capture with structural stability. Each branch represents a decision made by growth hormones and local chemical gradients, an organic implementation of distributed computing. No central processor decides how a tree should grow. Each cell follows simple rules that, when scaled, produce astonishing complexity. In computer science, we call such systems emergent. In life, we call them beautiful. The same fractal principles appear everywhere in the natural world. River deltas, lightning bolts, bronchial tubes, neural networks. They are nature's compression algorithm, a way to encode infinite complexity within finite space. Every branching system is a compromise between energy and information, cost and function. Trees achieve this balance flawlessly. Their form is both aesthetically graceful and computationally efficient, a sculpture carved by mathematics and necessity. And we, with all our supercomputers, still struggle to model that balance without wasting energy. It's worth pausing here, because the idea of fractal memory offers a profound metaphor for how life, at all scales, stores experience. When we look at a tree, we see its whole shape reflected in every part. The smallest twig echoes the pattern of the trunk. The cellular arrangement in the bark mirrors the distribution of branches. Its self-similarity, a recursive pattern across scales. In this sense, the tree doesn't store its memory in one central location, but throughout its structure. Every part contains a map of the whole. There is an ancient resonance to this idea. Mystical traditions across cultures have imagined the universe as a kind of cosmic tree. The Norse Yggdrasil, the Kabbalistic tree of life, the sacred Ashvata in Hindu philosophy. These mythic trees are not coincidences. They are archetypal expressions of how humans instinctively perceive order as growth, branching, and return. Even before we had language for it, we understood that information and form were one. In a way, the symbolic trees of myth are the first data visualizations. They are diagrams of reality itself. If the forest could speak, what would it say about our digital age? Perhaps it would whisper that we've become too linear, too impatient, that our memory systems, built for precision and permanence, lack the softness of natural forgetting. A forest remembers in gradients, not absolutes. It remembers the tendency of things, the direction of sunlight, the flavor of a season, the recurring patterns of wet and dry. Its data is analog, continuous, sensory. Meanwhile, Our data is discrete, brittle, and easily fragmented. In trying to capture everything, we sometimes lose the essence. We remember facts, but forget rhythms. And yet, deep inside our own bodies, we too carry tree-like memories. Our lungs branch like forests. Our neurons sprout dendrites. The word itself borrowed from Greek dendron, meaning tree. Even our circulatory system follows branching laws strikingly similar to botanical ones. The patterns of life repeat, fractal upon fractal, because they work. They are evolution's signature, written in vascular ink. Perhaps the real reason trees seem so intelligent is that their design mirrors the one within us. In the last few decades, scientists have begun exploring a new frontier known as biomimetic computing, systems inspired by nature's information strategies. Some researchers study how slime molds solve optimization problems without a brain. Others investigate how the DNA of living cells can store massive amounts of digital data. A gram of DNA can theoretically hold 215 petabytes of information. That's more than all the data generated by the internet in a year. And yet DNA doesn't require electricity, doesn't overheat, and lasts thousands of years when stored properly. When you think about it, a tree is already running a form of DNA-based computation encoded in living tissue. Each leaf is a data interface, each cell a processing unit. The entire organism is an analog supercomputer optimized for resilience and low energy consumption. It's not just that trees store data better than we do. It's that they understand it differently. They don't separate information from life. For them, information is life, the organizing principle that allows atoms to assemble into meaning. If someday we manage to merge biology and computing fully, to create systems that grow, heal, and evolve, we will have in essence reinvented the tree. To store something truly means to allow it to change you. That's the forest's wisdom. Every leaf, every root, every year of growth alters the tree's internal map. Memory, here, is participation, a slow dialogue between organism and environment. Maybe our machines will one day learn this humility, that to know something is not to control it, but to grow alongside it. And maybe, by studying the patient intelligence of trees, we can design technologies that not only store information but nurture it. Because the goal of memory is not simply to remember, it is to become what was remembered. Somewhere in the middle of a forest, where no signal can reach and no machine hum can be heard, the data of the world flows in silence. It does not rush like the packets in our networks, nor does it flicker like the electric pulses of our CPUs. It seeps, slowly, patiently, through root and soil, air and leaf. The forest is not only alive, it is remembering. Let us slow down, once again, and listen to this memory. When scientists measure the isotopic ratios in the growth rings of trees, the balance of oxygen-18 to oxygen-16, or the presence of carbon-14, they are in essence reading a form of analog memory. These isotopes are the traces of old climates and vanished atmospheres. A dry year leaves a lighter isotopic fingerprint, a humid one, a heavier mark. Across centuries, these variations accumulate into patterns that scientists can decode, reconstructing past climates with astonishing precision. The data is all there, embedded in cellulose, recorded in silence. Compare this to our own archives. Every few years we must migrate data to new media. Hard drives decay, formats become obsolete, and entire civilizations of code disappear when servers go dark. Yet the information within a piece of wood, buried in permafrost or sealed in amber, can last tens of thousands of years. Trees have no concept of obsolescence. They store their information in matter itself, stable, renewable, self-maintaining. In this way, a tree is not only a biological being, it is a living hard drive for the planet's history. The Japanese cedar trees on Yakushima Island, for instance, are estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Within their trunks are compressed millennia of volcanic eruptions, monsoons, and human presence. Each ring tells the story of survival through fluctuation, of droughts endured, of sunlit seasons savoured. The cedar does not forget. Even when the outer bark sheds and falls to the forest floor, the inner memory remains intact. We, meanwhile, erase our histories every day. Our documents are deleted, our photos lost to corrupted files, our servers wiped clean for efficiency. Digital memory is, paradoxically, forgetful. Biological memory, though slow, is persistent. It binds time within form. In another sense, the data of a tree is not only stored in its wood, but in the patterns of life it sustains. When a branch grows toward the sun, it is performing a calculation, a living algorithm that balances light absorption, water transport, and structural stability. These decisions are embedded in its architecture. Every leaf angle, every vein, is an output of millions of tiny biochemical computations that occurred over years. In computer science, we often speak of optimization problems, of finding the best solution given limited resources. Trees solve such problems constantly, without code, without algorithms written in text. They compute by being. Consider also the carbon flux. Each year, forests absorb roughly 7.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This process is not just ecological, it is informational. Through photosynthesis, trees convert raw environmental data, sunlight, gas concentration, temperature, humidity, into chemical form. They integrate these inputs into a stable output, biomass. This is data transformation in its most elegant form. If human computation is linear and discrete, tree computation is continuous and embodied. We work in instructions and loops. Trees work in flows and balances. Where we use logic, they use feedback. Where we store bytes, they store molecules. And the astonishing thing is that both represent information, just expressed in different physical languages. Now imagine an entire forest as a distributed computing system. The canopy acts as a vast array of sensors, each leaf capturing light and atmospheric metrics. The root system functions like a network bus, transmitting messages encoded in chemical pulses. Mycorrhizal fungi serve as the routers, relaying, balancing, and modulating information across the grid. And the soil itself? It is the storage medium, a mixture of minerals and organic matter that archives every interaction, every fallen leaf, every decay process. It is humbling to realize that the architecture of nature's computation predates ours by billions of years. Evolution has already solved most of the problems we're now trying to simulate. Distributed processing, fault tolerance, energy efficiency, redundancy, and graceful degradation. Trees do all of these instinctively, elegantly, and with nearly zero waste. Where our data centers consume the power of small nations, forests compute quietly using sunlight. Where our cables corrode, their fungal networks renew. Where our devices heat and fail, theirs breathe and grow. In a way, our computers are poor imitations of the natural intelligence that surrounds us. We often call our devices smart, but what they possess is not intelligence. It is speed. Real intelligence, as the forest teaches, is not about processing more data. It is about storing the right data, in the right place, for the right time. That is what trees do. They do not remember every gust of wind or every droplet of rain. Instead, they compress their experiences into the language of form, into the thickness of a ring, the curve of a limb, the density of their wood. They store essence, not noise. They preserve what matters, the signal that ensures survival and continuity. In that sense, trees are natural masters of lossy compression. But unlike our digital formats, their compression algorithm is not destructive. It filters information through purpose, retaining what sustains life and letting go of what doesn't. Every bit of data stored by a tree serves the function of existence, the balance between stability and adaptation, and perhaps, in that balance, lies the most profound lesson for us. For all our computational power, we often mistake accumulation for wisdom. We hoard information, replicate it endlessly, and drown in our own archives. Trees, instead, remind us that true memory is selective, that to store well is to understand what must be kept and what must be released. So next time you stand beneath a tree, remember, you're standing under a library, not one made of paper or code, but of matter, motion, and time. Each rustle of leaves is a query, each shadow a whisper of old data passing through living circuits. The forest around you is running its own operating system, calm, ancient, and astonishingly efficient. It stores the story of the earth not in text or binary, but in breath, and it never stops recording. Wherever you are right now, perhaps sitting near a window or in a quiet room with the hum of distant traffic, imagine, for a moment, that the air around you is full of invisible threads. Each one carries a trace of what once was, breaths exhaled long ago, fragments of pollen, the faintest dust of memory drifting through time. Now imagine that, somewhere beyond the horizon, a forest is breathing in that same air. Its leaves are absorbing what we've released. Its wood will, one day, hold the record of this moment, encoded not in words, but in carbon. This is the grand continuity of memory between humans and trees, the shared archive of atmosphere. When we think of data, we usually imagine cold precision, a spreadsheet, a cloud server, a number on a screen. But data, in its truest form, is simply difference, a shift, a trace of something that once was. In that sense, the air itself is data and trees are its readers. Through photosynthesis, they take in the fluctuating carbon signatures of our world, the exhaust of engines, the breath of animals, the decay of soil, and fix them into the solid geometry of wood. Every ring, every cell becomes a timestamp. Researchers studying tree ring isotopes in recent decades have uncovered more than environmental history. They found echoes of civilization. The Industrial Revolution left a chemical scar in wood, a rise in radiocarbon levels that began in the 1800s and intensified with nuclear testing in the 20th century. Some call it the bomb spike, a global mark visible in the cellulose of trees across continents. It's a shared entry in the planetary database, one we never consciously wrote, but which every forest quietly recorded. If we could decode it fully, we could read human history as trees see it, not through documents or monuments, but through chemistry and form. This is perhaps the most poetic irony of our age. We have created supercomputers to simulate climate models, yet the data they rely on comes in large part from tree rings, from biological recorders whose operating system was perfected long before our first code was written. The forest, in other words, has always been the most reliable archive of human activity. When the Bronze Age flourished, when empires rose and fell, when ships crossed oceans, trees were watching. They measured every change in the air, every shift in rainfall, every trace of soot from distant fires. Even now, in the Amazon and the Siberian taiga, the great trunks continue to write, tirelessly, elegantly without recognition. And unlike our machines, they never need maintenance. They never experience downtime. Their language is slow but perfect. Each year, a ring is added. Not randomly, but as a cumulative synthesis of countless environmental variables: temperature, sunlight, humidity, wind stress, nutrient flow. The pattern of the ring, its width and density, is not just a response to the weather, it's a signature of the ecosystem's equilibrium. In computer science, we might call it a checksum, a compact verification code that ensures the integrity of information. The ring says, in its own way, this year was complete, this record unbroken. There is another layer to this biological data structure, one that bridges the living and the dead. When a tree falls and decays, the information it contains does not vanish, it diffuses. Fungi, insects, bacteria, all these decomposers become agents of data migration. The carbon, nitrogen, and minerals stored in wood are released into the soil, reabsorbed by new roots, reincorporated into the next generation of trees. The information, once locked in a trunk, becomes distributed across the ecosystem. It's as though the forest runs a natural form of redundancy, a biological backup system where no data is ever truly lost, only transformed. This cycle of decay and renewal resembles a kind of organic blockchain, not in code, but in continuity. Each tree inherits, in chemical and ecological form, the cumulative memory of its predecessors. Each root system draws on the enriched soil of past generations, linking the present to the ancient past. It's no wonder that forests feel sacred to so many cultures. They embody permanence through change, a data structure of life that resists deletion. Now let us turn, gently, toward the microscopic level, to where memory becomes molecular. Inside every cell of a tree is DNA, and within that DNA are not only the instructions for growth, but also a record of environmental stress. Epigenetic markers, chemical tags attached to DNA, can be modified by external factors like drought, temperature, or pathogens. These modifications influence which genes are expressed, and can even be passed to future generations. In essence, they are bits of environmental data written directly into the genetic code. When scientists examine how trees adapt to changing climates, they often find these epigenetic memories guiding the process. A pine tree that endured a harsh winter will, through methylation patterns, remember that stress, and its offspring may be better prepared for similar conditions. We often think of DNA as static, as the blueprint of life, but in trees, it's more like a dynamic storage device, rewriting itself in response to experience, much like a neural network adjusting its weights. It's almost unsettling how close this comes to what we call machine learning. Yet, where our models require terabytes of data and immense computing power, the tree does it quietly, with the faint energy of sunlight. Its algorithms are biological, self-repairing, and infinitely parallel. The deeper we look, the more it becomes clear that trees don't just store data, they embody it. Every part of their structure, from the shape of their roots to the spiral of their branches, encodes feedback loops learned over millions of years. A leaf's venation pattern is a record of optimization. A trunk's taper is a memory of growth under gravity. Even the sound of wind through the leaves when captured and analyzed carries data about the tree's structure, its elasticity, density, and water content. The tree, in that moment, is speaking its architecture into the air. What we call nature's silence is, perhaps, only our inability to hear the data within it. And so we return to our original thought, that trees store data better than we do. Not because they store more, but because they store meaningfully. Their archives are not cluttered with redundancy or noise. Every byte of biological information serves the purpose of survival, interconnection, and harmony. When they store data, they store it in balance with the system that uses it. That is a kind of efficiency we have not yet learned. Maybe one day our computers will move closer to that ideal, learning from forests rather than merely modelling them. Perhaps we'll build machines that are not separate from nature, but inspired by its intelligence, data centres that grow instead of being built, algorithms that breathe rather than consume. But for now, the lesson remains humbling. The next time you walk beneath a canopy of trees, think of the centuries of data hovering above you, not as code, not as computation, but as a living conversation between earth and time. Each rustling leaf is an access point, each ring a paragraph in the grand story of memory that began long before we learned to write. And somewhere within that whisper of photosynthesis, the planet is still recording. Wherever you are, whether it's night and the room is dimly lit or early morning and the first light is sliding through your window, take a moment to breathe in slowly. The air that fills your lungs has touched leaves, drifted through canopies, and circled the globe. You are at this very moment part of the same cycle that connects all memory on this planet. The trees outside your window remember you, not in thought, not in name, but in chemistry. You exhale what they inhale, and their quiet record of existence continues with every breath. This is where the story of data in all its meanings comes home. For centuries, humans have tried to build systems that preserve information: clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, magnetic tape, quantum bits. Yet each new medium comes with its own fragility, its own impermanence. We delete, we overwrite, we forget. We design for speed, not for endurance. In contrast, the forest keeps its archive alive by folding it into the process of being. There is no distinction between storage and life. They are the same act. When we walk through a forest, we walk through a living archive of entropy reversed. The carbon atoms in a trunk might have once been part of an ancient volcano's breath, or a forgotten animal's bones. Time collapses here. Every ring is a geological sentence in an unending story. Trees remember through change, not through stasis. Their growth is their memory, and that, perhaps, is their greatest intelligence. We, on the other hand, often treat memory as a burden, something to store externally so that we can move faster, think less, rely more on machines. We offload our pasts into clouds, into servers hidden in deserts or underwater vaults, far removed from the living cycles of the earth. But these memories, digital, detached, restless, do not age gracefully. They decay without meaning. They lack context, soil, and time. In the forest, there is no such loss. When a tree dies, its information does not vanish. It becomes food. The mycelium network absorbs its carbon and nitrogen, redistributing them to saplings that rise in its place. Its physical form becomes narrative material for the next generation. Death is not deletion, it is compression. The data remains, smaller, subtler, but still present. The tree does not cling to its identity. It releases what it no longer needs. There is a kind of wisdom in that. We often define intelligence as the capacity to learn, to adapt, to remember. But perhaps true intelligence, the kind that sustains, is also the ability to forget gracefully. The forest does this beautifully. It remembers enough to endure and forgets enough to evolve. That balance is something our machines cannot yet do. In artificial intelligence, we grapple with the challenge of catastrophic forgetting. when a model learns new data but loses what it previously knew. Trees solved this long ago. Their form encodes both persistence and adaptability, deep roots that hold the past, and new shoots that seek the future. Their growth pattern ensures continuity without rigidity, memory without stagnation. It is this dynamic equilibrium that makes them superior archivists. They remember through rhythm, through seasonal pulses of expansion and rest. And in this rhythm, data becomes something sacred, not static information, but lived experience. Imagine if our technologies worked this way. Imagine data centers designed like ecosystems, where the heat of computation feeds energy back into the system, where digital waste decomposes into useful code, where information evolves instead of being endlessly stored. In such a world, the boundary between biology and computation would dissolve. Memory itself would become organic. This vision is not fantasy. It is already beginning to emerge. Scientists are exploring DNA-based storage systems capable of holding exabytes of data in a single gram, mimicking the dense, efficient encoding strategies of life. Others are designing neuromorphic processors inspired by the adaptive networks of neurons, or even by plant signaling systems where computation is analog, continuous, and distributed. If the history of technology is a mirror of evolution, then our next leap may not be faster chips, but living computation. Systems that grow, self-correct, and remember meaningfully. Systems that store information the way trees do, not as static archives, but as living participants in the world's ongoing narrative. But before that future arrives, we can already learn from the forest's example. Step into a grove of pines and notice how each tree leans ever so slightly, finding its place in the geometry of light. Listen to the sound of wind shifting through the canopy, each vibration an emergent form of data exchange. Smell the resin, the decay, the renewal. All around you, the most sophisticated information system on Earth is operating at perfect efficiency, requiring no electricity, no instruction sets, no updates. This is the intelligence we've always lived among but rarely acknowledged. Our ancestors sensed it instinctively. Ancient cultures often saw trees as embodiments of knowledge. The Norse Yggdrasil connecting worlds, the Bodhi tree under which enlightenment bloomed, the oak of Dodona whispering divine messages through rustling leaves. These myths were not naive, they were metaphors for what science is now confirming, that trees are repositories of immense, interconnected memory, biological, chemical, and cultural. When we burned forests, we did not just destroy wood, we erased memory. When we replant, we're not just restoring greenery, we're restoring the planet's capacity to remember. To preserve a tree, then, is to preserve part of the Earth's long-term consciousness. And perhaps to become wiser humans, we must begin storing our own data differently. Not in isolated silos of code, but in shared, organic, resilient systems that grow and breathe alongside us. To store, not for eternity, but for continuity. Because memory without transformation is mere hoarding, but memory that lives, that adapts, decays, renews, becomes wisdom. As you listen now, perhaps your breath has slowed and your thoughts have begun to settle. Imagine the forest breathing with you, countless leaves opening and closing, countless tiny pores exchanging the molecules of existence. In that exchange, information flows in both directions. You are remembering the world and the world is remembering you. The next time you pass beneath a tree, pause. Look up. Its canopy might seem still, but within it pulses a vast computation. Sunlight transcribed into sugar, wind translated into structure, carbon written into form. That tree knows how to store meaning without needing to own it. It teaches silently that information is not something to possess, it is something to participate in. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all, that the earth itself is a great archive, and we, its transient inhabitants, are both its readers and its written words. So tonight or tomorrow, when you see the outline of a tree against the dim blue of dusk, remember, you're looking at one of the oldest, most elegant data systems in existence. It does not hum or glow or need to be rebooted. It listens, learns, and records the rhythm of the universe in its very flesh. It is patient, it is precise, and it is still writing.